And it's time for us to get into our extra special where we take a deep dive into the stories shaping our nation. And this week we turn our focus to the 2025 Appropriation Bill presented by President Bola Tinubu to the joint session of the National Assembly. The proposed budget, totaling 49.7 trillion naira, has been described by some lawmakers as ambitious, while others question its feasibility. Now, key allocations have been made to critical sectors like security, education, health, and infrastructure, with bold goals such as reducing inflation to 15% by 2025. But with a high budget deficit and concerns about realistic implementation, this bill has sparked debates across the country. Today, we will unpack what this budget means for Nigerians, the economy, and the nation.
So joining us to explore these issues are two distinguished gentlemen. Inibong Usen, the head of research and policy advisory at BudgIT, a civic tech organization pushing for transparency and accountability in public finance, and Nnaemeka Obiaraeri, a development economist and investment banking executive who will shed light on the economic and financial implications of this budget. Gentlemen, you are welcome. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Inibong, Inibong, many thanks as well. Let's start with you, Inibong, right? The 2025 budget has been described as ambitious. So from a public finance perspective, what stands out to you the most in this appropriation bill?
Yeah, thanks for having me. For me, I would like to start from the key fundamentals. So what's the budget anchored on? We're still largely a mono economy. Oil still contributes, at least 85%, of our foreign exchange earnings. And so oil is very key to the implementation of the budget. So if you look at the oil price at $75 per barrel, it would seem that, the federal government has been a bit conservative, especially if you consider the fact that Brent crude is doing $73 per barrel as it is. But I would have thought that maybe we would have put it maybe around the region of $65 per barrel, so that in the event that we're able to overshoot that, then there's some excess that can go into the sovereign wealth fund, as the case may be. If you look at production numbers as well, as at last month, or as at October, I would have thought that 2.06 million barrels per day was overly ambitious. But miraculously, we've been able to raise production to about 1.8 million barrels per day as at November this year. And so it would seem that if the federal government is able to sustain, some of the interventions that have been carried out in the oil and gas sector to ramp up production, that maybe 2.06 million barrels per day is in the realm of possibility. But that doesn't discount the fact that we still need to conclusively, address and sustainably address the issue of oil theft. We have to ramp up metering across board so that we know exactly where the theft is occurring, and then, we can't curb it. Additional efforts to, drive investments in that area is one that government needs to, continue the drive on. It's good that Shell has invested $5 billion, recently, but the gains of that we expect to come in the next couple of years. We also need to stop the practice of reserve-backed, or resource-backed lending, where the NNPC, gets credit at very high, interest rates, and then use our crude to, hedge, such borrowings. It's not one that augurs well for our fiscal regime, as the case may be. If I come to inflation, that's where I think that the government has missed the mark. Inflation is currently at 34%, headline inflation, food inflation at almost 40%. And so one wonders what is driving government's optimism for it to be able to drive down inflation to about 15% in the within the next 12 months. It doesn't seem that food inflation and the drivers of food inflation, whether it be food insecurity in the food belt, basin, whether it be, some policy initiatives that the Federal Ministry of Agriculture is supposed to be driving towards improving access to credit, towards providing improved seedlings for farmers, towards providing that market for farmers to be able to maximize, the gains from production that would significantly drive down the price of food. I do not see that, happening within the next couple of months. If you also look at energy, that is also a major driver of Nigeria's inflation, with PMS doing over 1,000, naira per liter in some parts, and as high as 1,300, naira per liter in some parts of the country, and the increased cost of electricity with regards to the increase in the cost for the customers on band A. I do not also see that energy costs, would reduce, in the short term. And so 15% inflation rate looks like a tall order. If I come to the budget framework with regards to revenue, revenue overly optimistic as well, especially with regards to oil revenue. For the first 4 months of the year, we've done about 4 trillion. At the first 8 months, of the year, we've done about 4 trillion. So 19 trillion seems like a very, tall order, even if we might be able to ramp up, production to 2.06 million barrels per day. But we also have to have it in mind that a large, chunk of our production, is being used to, repay back some of the loans that the NNPC, has acquired over the last 3, 4, 5 years. And so we need to check it, because this would have a significant impact on the credibility of the budget. As you know, the budget at 49.7 trillion is Nigeria's largest budget in naira terms. But of course, in dollar terms, at $33.16 billion, it's a bit, lower than last year's budget. If you put this, side by side, the fact that the 2023 budget, 2024 budget, implementation of the 2024 budget has been extended to 2025, that would mean that the revenues expected in 2025 would be used in implementing both the 2025 budget and the 2024 budget that has been rolled over into the 2025 fiscal year. So I do not, see a situation where we would be able to optimally and fully implement the 2025 budget.
All right.
Inibong, thank you very much for reeling out all those information. Very interesting. But Mr. Obiaraeri, let's come to you. As an economist, first of all, I have 2 questions. Do you recognize that there is a budget deficit, and how ambitious do you think this government's endeavor might be?
I am really shocked that any Nigerian that understands the fundamentals and the potentials in Nigerian economy will see a 47.9 trillion naira budget, mere $31 billion budget as ambitious. It's not ambitious at all. I sit down here and I do a mental scan of the economy, and I see an economy that has the potentials to do average of above $379 billion annually in terms of revenue. 2022, South Africa, 60 million people. They don't have the kind of resources that we have naturally. They did $126 billion revenue. And I see this budget as one that is really, it is actually depressing, in that we have no business running a deficit of 13 trillion naira. We have no business servicing debt at 15 trillion. And if time will permit me, I can show you clearly how we can actually do a budget of over 100 trillion naira, raise the revenue, fund it, and yet not incur a cent or a naira debt in terms of deficit. Most of us do not understand how strong and how resilient and how massively blessed Nigeria is. I look backward, 2010 to be precise. Please fact check me. From October 1st to October 30th, 2010. You can fact check me, go to Central Bank CBN website, you will see it. Nigeria did average of 2.88 million barrels a day for 30 days in 2010. And we exported 2.43 million barrels a day for that whole month. Is it that the oil wells have dried up? Or is it that we lack? As at even May 2015, We are doing 2.3, 2.4 million barrels a day, crude and condensate. Nigeria has capacity to do about 3 million barrels a day. Brazil, 15 billion barrels reserve. Petrobras does 2.3 million barrels every day. NNPC can do it. But there's something we are missing, which is fundamental. And that is we need massive reforms, institutional and physical reform across the sectors for us to drive the kind of development and reform that we want. We continue to forget the fact that in 2007-2008, this country developed a global infrastructure development master plan that clearly showed that we need to make investment of $3 trillion over the next 30 years, even to bring our economy from the current parlor state to that of even a second world economy. And that simply means we can easily attract and invest $100 billion investment across the different sectors of the economy consistently and sustainably year on year for 30 years. So for us to see a $31 billion budget, and Nigerians are even frisky, thinking it's not ambitious. From the non-oil sector, I sit here and I can show you how we can do 2,500 agro clusters. We will borrow $15 billion against it, $6 million per cluster. And in the next 1 year, we will unlock $109 billion revenue, export earnings from agro sector. We will create 10 to 20 million jobs. We will generate nothing less than 125,000 agro rangers that can help us slay insecurity over the next 6 months in such a way that you can enter Rumigbo in Port Harcourt, travel to Pambegwa in Kaduna State, 24/7, nobody will molest you, nobody will kidnap you. This country is such a country that is so blessed. I see that as, is it something that it has beclouded our leaders?
But
Is it something that has covered their eyes, both at the federal and state level, for them not to see this?
But Nnaemeka, now you have told that Nigeria can make over 100 billion. You've also, while giving us a possibility, also tendered the problem where you told that we need massive reforms. So how can Nigeria bridge this gap when it comes to revenue? In the short term, knowing that when it comes to oil, it's all rubbish at this point. In the short term, how can we bridge that gap when it comes to revenue then?
I am asking you, why do you think the oil is rubbish? The oil is rubbish because we have, let me tell you, in the short term, within the next 6 months, what do we do? See, we are not the only oil producing country, and we must understand this. We are at the level we have been over the last 9 years. Brazil was at that level. What did the Brazilian government do? And which every time I plead, I beg, even if it means for us to go on our knees, President Tinubu can do this. For us to see, oil is our working capital. For us to actually sweat revenue, I'm not saying 1 year, 6 months. I've been on your studio many times and I've shared this. It's not rocket science. Get JP Morgan Chase, get Barclays, get Stanbic IBTC, get Chapel Deham, appoint them as book runners. NNPC as currently structured, we never make progress. We never take us anywhere, and that is the truth.
Mr. Obiaraeri, at this point, I'm going to ask you for an invoice. So I'm going to send you an invoice at the mentions. But let's move away from, the potentiality of our oil and gas sector and what it would take for us to rebuild in the shortest time period, which is half a year, 6 months. And let's talk about transparency and accountability, as well as compliance with the appropriation bill. Let me come to you, Inibong, for this. You represent BudgIT. In scrutinizing the bill, do you see any, with the proposed bill, do you critique anything when it comes to transparency, compliance, and even just looking at the numbers in terms of inflation, proposed reduction in inflation at 15%? Is there any irregularities with the bill?
Yeah, I mean, having skimmed through it, it's over 2,400 pages. There are a couple of issues that I have identified in the short time that I've reviewed it. So with issues around transparency, around revealing the details of the budgets of certain commissions, certain agencies of government, it would seem that we haven't learned from the past. If you look at the development commissions, right, that are under the Federal Ministry of Niger Delta Affairs headquarters. So you have the Niger Delta Development Commission, the Southwest Development Commission, Northeast, Northwest, Southeast. And you look at the budget, cumulatively is over 2 trillion naira. And I mean, it goes against logic that you would have a cumulative budget of over 2 trillion naira without a breakdown. If you look at the budgets of those commissions, the chunk of their budgets has been situated under personnel. And there's no way that those commissions, especially as newly established, for the newly established ones, I mean, the Southwest and the Southeast Development Commissions were established this year, that you would have, personnel of over 400 billion naira in one of those commissions, but cumulatively personnel of over 2 trillion naira. This does not, it doesn't tell that there's going to be transparency around the utilization of the resources that would be allocated, to those commissions. And if we use the NDDC as an example, the NDDC has been a cesspool of corruption for the over, one decade or 10 years or more that it has been in existence. It has delivered on that development, in the Niger Delta region. What you see are, poorly implemented projects, unimplemented projects, and projects that cannot stand the test of time, across the length and breadth of the Niger Delta. There was a forensic audit that was conducted. There was investigation that was also conducted by the Federal House of Representatives. And if you remember the off your mic era, you would agree with me that since the Senate, the minister at the time, who is now the Senate president, was told to off his mic, that mic has remained off. We do not know the results, of the forensic audit. And so if we are starting out these commissions and towing the same line that, was used to run or has been used to run the Niger Delta Development Commission, I do not think that, there's much gains that we can realize from that. If you also look at agencies like TETFund, the TETFund has a budget of almost 1 trillion naira, about 940 billion naira. And there is no breakdown as to how TETFund intends to, spend that 940 billion. So how do accountability actors like BudgIT, like even the media, how are they going to be able to track, what and how these agencies and commissions are spending, these large funds? If you also look at the government-owned enterprises, right, the likes of the Nigerian Port Authority and the rest, there are about almost 70 of them. The breakdown of their budgets also wasn't part of the budget submitted by the president. And this has been a legacy issue over time. I know that last year, for the very first time, the budget office had released the budget breakdowns of the government-owned enterprises. But then we didn't see the approved budget. And so this time around also, we haven't seen the breakdown of the budget of the government-owned enterprises. And this is very key because the government-owned enterprises are the enterprises set up to generate revenue for government. And so if we have no clue or no idea as to how they spend some of those revenues, that would limit, restrict the amount of, government revenues that would flow into the general pool that government, would now use to fund, the ministries, departments, and agencies of government that are, that have been set up to deliver, very essential services to the Nigerian populace.
Just very insightful there, and also, I mean, 2,000 plus pages. I must commend the guys the good guys at BudgIT for always, just being on the lookout for the good people of Nigeria. Mazino.
Yeah. Well, Inibong, very interesting when you talk, and I'm wondering what your suggestions would be when it comes to security. I'm going to pose this to both you gentlemen. So for 2024, ransom payment got up to 2.2 million naira. Now the budget for 2025 has it at 4.9 trillion this year. So we all know that security is something that actually helps the economy to do more, to get better. And this is very serious. So that's why 4.9 trillion has been allocated for it. But is it enough when you compare it to the 2.2 that was spent on ransom payments in the previous year? What do you think? Let me start with you, Mr. Nnaemeka.
Like I said, nothing will be achieved even if they increase it to 10 trillion naira without restructuring and reforming the whole security architecture in Nigeria.
Very
and
optimistic.
I want it to be on record. Between 2015 to 2023, under Muhammadu Buhari, Nigeria wasted and squandered $25 billion as security expenditure. When he became president, insecurity was practically narrowed to the northeast. By the time he left in 2023, even his hometown, Katsina State, had been taken over and overrun by bandits. For us to fix the security infrastructure in Nigeria, we need to go back to the basics. We need to look at rejigging the whole thing and hand over security to the communities. Mr. President made a very resounding statement when he was campaigning. He said he will recruit 50 million youths. He doesn't need to recruit 50 million youths. If we want security to work in such a way that we don't even pump in money, we can actually add extra 6 trillion. And what would that 6 trillion do? We have developed proposals that we have shared with them on how we can fix the security problem in Nigeria. And it's at the root of the problems we have. We have 8,809 electoral wards. From every electoral ward, go to the people, the clergy, the town union leaders. Select 100 of your sons. Every community knows those who are the criminals, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Even Zamfara state governor alluded to it, that if they have the political will from the federal government, that they can actually destroy the bandits in 2 weeks. And I share that with him. 100 youths from every electoral ward, 8,809 electoral ward. It will take us $3.75 billion to set up this capital expenditure. Get a nursing and not to give us 4 armored personnel carrier in every local government area and 1 machine-mounted truck, machine gun-mounted truck. Give them Kenkoso drug and drones. Give them AK-47. 100 from every electoral ward. Create agro-industrial clusters. 500 to 1,000 hectares in every electoral ward. I tell you the truth, under the supervision of the National Security Advisor and the governors, not under the army and the police, because most of our security architecture today is highly compromised.
Mr. Nnaemeka, let me get this straight. Mr. Nnaemeka,
these guys will have the
let me get this straight, Mr. Nnaemeka.
Protect their mothers, their fathers, and their brothers. In 6 months,
just a second, Mr. Nnaemeka.
Unknown government, banditry, ISWAP, Boko Haram will be a thing of the past.
Let's take a look at the anatomy of what you've just proposed. You're asking that 100 youths from each ward be selected arbitrarily, be given weapons, tanks, independent from the police and the army. Aren't you creating another threat? And yet, at the end of the day... Did you hear
what I said? I said, under the National Security Advisor, Nuhu still, all of the security agencies report to him. To set up an agro rangers.
Has this worked anywhere before?
See, if you want me to give you, I don't have the time, I'll give you details of the structure. Details of the structure is like, let me tell you, they will be more disciplined, they will be more efficient, they will be more professional than the centralized convoluted criminality that we have in Abuja and across the Federation. Let me tell you, between 1960 to 1966, we had such structures in place. It's on record that the police of the old Eastern Nigeria was reputed to be more efficient than that of the federal police under Michael Obara. We are not asking for state police. We are asking for indigenous community-owned agro rangers under the command of the National Security Advisor, properly structured. Let me tell you what will happen.
All right.
See.
Mr. Nnaemeka, I must say that, you know, youth like that are at risk of going rogue, right? If you're putting people who are not in uniform, whether they're agro rangers or not agro rangers, the risk of them going rogue is still yet to be seen. I think that instead of us pushing this narrative, it's very important that we talk about decentralizing the security agency that we have in Nigeria, and also the trust deficit between the people and the security agencies need to be discussed when we're having this discussion. But another thing I want to bring us to our attention, because we're pressed for time and we really have to get through our questions here, is about how the infrastructural development of Nigeria is being highlighted in this appropriation bill. And one of them is the Lagos-Calabar and the Sokoto-Lagos road projects. Now, this highlight of the budget, I must ask the significance of this budget, of these projects, when it comes to economic stability, driving economic growth for the nation. How can it takes a huge chunk of the bill. I mean, not huge, but it's considerable. It's considerable amount of it. What do you make? Do you think in completion it's going to do anything in driving economic growth for the nation? Mr. Nnaemeka.
To be honest with you, by this time next year, we'll gather here in your studio to discuss a deeper Nigeria in a deeper rut. we can't keep on doing the same thing. We're doing the same thing every year in, year out, and expect different results. Nigeria today, most of our road infrastructure, most of our road networks are dilapidated. I will expect those in power to think about consolidating resources in fixing the existing ones rather than doing new ones. I'll give you an example here. Anambra in 2006 was number 28 in terms of education. They had a governor who did not go building new primary schools and new secondary schools. He took the old schools, handed over to missions, cut out the bureaucratic bottleneck of criminality in the civil service, and started funding them through missions. In eight years, he took his state from number 1 to number 28 to number 1, and they've remained among the top 3 since then. We can't keep on repeating the same thing every time. In Nigeria, we have over 11,000 abandoned projects. Every new government goes on a new project, and of course, you know why they do it. Over invoice contracts by 300%, trim out whatever and abandon it. There is no road in Nigeria today that is working. Rather than wasting money doing new roads, new infrastructure, why not consolidate revenue? Fixing the existing ones, northeast to southeast, southeast to southwest, southeast to south-south, north to the south, existing roads. See, I tell you this, we've like said, we're going to spend 4.9 trillion on security. Mark my word, I'm not a prophet. By this time next year, we will gather again to discuss a deteriorated Nigeria worse than it is today. Mark my word.
All right. I mean, because we're pressed for time, we're out of time. Very quickly, Inibong, your final thoughts on this bill, right? As we look to, it has passed the first reading. It's now moved on to the second reading. It's very fast, barely 24 hours after it was presented on the floor. It's now been passed for, the first reading has passed and now on to the second reading. What do you want Nigerians to know at this time? To be aware of?
To answer your question, I just need to correct the figures around security and defense. So it's actually 6.57 trillion naira, because there are some provisions under the service-wide votes, right, that are not under the budgets of the MDAs. And so it's around 6.5 trillion naira.
Inibong,
put that out.
Inibong, yeah. I must apologize profusely, but we will not be able to continue to let you in with your entry because we have run out of time on this segment and we have to move real quick into another one that will end the show. But we will be bringing you on another segment so that we can actually have this in its extensive form. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us on this discussion today. Thank you.